It is 9 o'clock sharp. Welcome to the April 2nd meeting for the Audit and Finance Committee. I appreciate you all being on this morning, and we have a very, very busy agenda this morning, so we're going to respect everyone's time and keep things moving forward. The first on our meeting agenda is to accept the minutes from our December 5th meeting. Everyone should have got those via email way back in December. So at this time, I will entertain a motion to accept those minutes.
I'll make a motion to accept the minutes from the previous meeting.
We have a motion. A second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Are you ready for the question? All in favor to accept the minutes as presented, state by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Hearing none, we will consider that motion approved unanimously. Next, we have a little bit of housekeeping here. We have a member retiring from the committee, Ms. Brooks. I don't see her on yet, but she has served 2 terms on the committee, so we appreciate her service and sad to see those members go as they fall off the cycle, but has always contributed and been ready with questions, so we definitely appreciate her. And also with that, we have the reappointment of Ms. Bowles to the 2nd term. Again, we always appreciate those individuals being involved and contributing. So some things that we do here in the review. So moving right along, and like I said, keeping time, because we have a busy meeting. We're going to defer to our partners at CLA, Coast North Island, for the presentation of our district audit results for the 22-23 year. So take it away.
Good morning. You guys hear me okay? Awesome.
Yes, sir.
All right, good deal. So what I'd like to do is share my screen, if I can, with the group here, and see if make sure I can make that work. You guys can see that? All right, perfect. All right, sounds great. Thank you so much. Well, again, it is a pleasure to be here today and be able to present the audit to you guys. Got a short presentation here to share with you all. We did present in a workshop recently to the board as well. So we already presented the results of the audit to them. But we've kind of taken some excerpts from that meeting and added a few other slides. If you guys have any questions at any point in time, feel free to stop us and we're glad to take those. And again, my name is Lincoln Schmidt, and I did serve as the principal over the entire engagement. And then today I've got Julie Miller as well with me that was instrumental in doing a lot of the heavy lifting on the audit. Which programs that we looked at. In addition to performing both the single audit and the financial audit, we also perform examination procedures over the investment of the school district's cash and investments, making sure they comply with state rules and regulations. We also issue a Florida management letter, which includes various state compliance matters that are detailed in that report. And then lastly, we do a data collection form, which will be or has been completed, or has been completed as it relates to the audit. So again, quite a bit that goes into the audit. Just some of the things that go into this. Just kind of giving a high-level overview of what goes into the audit. We do spend over 1,000 hours working on the school district's audit. We had 9 different engagement team members, 4 different reports that we issued. Total debits and credits, we actually extract all of the general ledger data out of the school district's accounting software and perform a variety of analysis on that and use it for a variety of testing purposes. So we analyzed over 1.8 million transactions using data analytics as part of our audit. So again, kind of gives you just an idea of the scope of what we're looking at. Obviously, we look at internal controls and fraud interviews, and obviously do a lot of sampling as well. But it kind of gives you an idea of kind of what went into the audit overall. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Julie to kind of talk about a quick recap of our audit reports and some of the programs we tested.
Thanks, Lance. So first of all, we issued our independent auditor's report on the financial statements. We've issued an unmodified opinion, which means we believe those statements are prepared in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. So you might think of that as a clean audit opinion on the financial statements. For the government auditing standards or yellow book report, and for this, we report on any internal control matters that may be a material weakness or significant deficiency. And we did identify one material weakness in the internal control structure, which we'll be reporting to you today. For the single audit, we tested 4 major programs this year. You can see those over on the right. It is a very heavy lift to audit 4 programs, so we appreciate all of the support that the district provides us throughout that process. And we did issue an unmodified opinion, meaning we believe you are in compliance with the requirements of those major programs that we tested. Then in our management letter for the Auditor General, we did have one recommendation that we're going to make based on our testing. So our first finding was for material audit adjustments. During the course of the audit, we identified one material adjustment that needed to be posted for the financial statements to be in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. It was about a $5 million adjustment related to sales tax revenue. It was really an accrual that got missed. So nothing malicious that occurred, just an accrual that was missed as part of the closeout process. So our recommendation related to this is to develop some additional internal control procedures when you're reconciling those accounts to ensure that you've identified all the accruals that need to be posted. And the next item is our recommendation around payroll documentation. And as we went through our not only the financial audit, but especially the single audit, we noticed that there is a lack of consistency in documentation around payroll approval. And our recommendation is that the district consider a standardized timekeeping program and really an electronic management, records management system where you can document consistently district-wide the payroll approvals and retain all that documentation in a centralized location.
All right, before we move on, any questions so far on the results of the audit or any of the findings before we move on? All right, hearing none, we will keep going. So I wanted to give you just a couple other financial highlights as well as we talk about the audit. One, you will note that we did have a new accounting standard that went into effect for the current year, GASB 96, which addresses subscription-based IT or information technology agreements. Essentially what this accounting standard is doing is, if we think back to when we used to buy software, we would buy a license, or we'd get a CD-ROM and that would be installed and we'd have that license for a period of time. Well, that's obviously, as we all know, has gone by the wayside, and now everything's a subscription model. And so really trying to recognize that asset that governments essentially are have the ability to use, and making sure that asset is recognized on the books. So in this case, subscription-based IT arrangements. Looking at this, we did have several $1 million, roughly $5 million, that was picked up as additional assets and liabilities. So essentially, the right to use asset equal to the net present value of those future payments, and then a corresponding liability is recorded on the books as a result of this new accounting standard. So again, something that in the big scheme of things, the accountants probably care the most about, making sure we get this right. But again, something new that we did have this year. One other slide that we shared with the full board that we wanted to share with this committee as well is just a look at the general fund unassigned and assigned fund balances as a percentage of revenue. The school district has a policy that they like to keep the general fund unassigned and assigned fund balance at 5% of total revenues. You can see for the year ended June 30, 2023, the school district was at 8%, so higher than the 5%, which is very good news. In addition to that, we did take a look at other school districts, and I want to share some of that information with you as well. And so, when we take a look at all the school districts across the state of Florida, the average, whenever we look at unassigned and assigned fund balance to revenue, is right around 13%, with a low of 4 and a high of 34%. So it varies quite a bit. But whenever we look at this information, there's really not a ton of correlation between, big and small, or, coastal versus inland counties. It's really all over the board. So one of the larger counties in the state is at 4%. Another one that's also in the probably top 5, both of them very close to Polk County, is at 25%. So really no, hard and fast rules on this, but rather just to give you an idea of, when just from a fiscal perspective, as a school district, sitting on a bunch of reserves that maybe they don't need, or they, essentially, getting tax revenue to support the operations. And I'd say, being closer to that 5% number is, it means that, the school district is fiscally responsible and not taking any more than they need from the citizens. So it kind of gives you an idea of where it's at. Obviously, this has to be balanced as well with the significant growth that the county has been having. So when we see the kind of growth that we've had in the past year and what we're projecting in future years, it's good to keep an eye on that, because that could very easily decrease with future projects and future capital needs going forward. So 2 of the things I just wanted to highlight as well, going into next year's audit, which will be performed by the Auditor General. One of the things that's going to be new is SAS 145. The best way I know to describe this new audit standard is really an enhanced guidance on the specific IT areas that we, as auditors, will need to look at as it relates to the school district's internal control environment. So in the past, we've always looked at the information technology infrastructure, specifically any automated controls or other things that maybe were critical to the financial reporting. But as auditors, we didn't have a ton of guidance as to exactly what we looked at. A lot of it was value add, not so much driven by audit standards. Now we've got some very specific rules that we'll have to comply with, looking at specifically program change management for any software that you've got access to, infrastructure security controls, network security, access, application security and user access, backup and recovery, and cybersecurity. All of these through the lens of the applications or environments that are critical to the IT environment. So it's not expanding the scope to other areas of the school district, but really focused on the general ledger, timekeeping activities, softwares that could be used for grant management. Anything that has a significant impact on our financial audit or compliance audit would be considered in scope as we look at SAS 145 moving into the future. And then lastly, there's a new standard, GASB 101, that's going to be in effect really for the 2025 audit. It's going to be the first time you're going to see that reported on. But what it does is it does try to get more consistency between how governments account for compensated absences. I know Julie and I would tell you, when we go to a client, especially pick up a new client, we never know what we're going to see as it relates to compensated absences, what's recorded, what's not recorded. Everyone seems to have just a slightly different angle on what should be recorded. And so what's nice about this audit standard, it's going to provide some more clarity and guidance, though it could result in some additional benefits being accrued that maybe weren't in the past. Before the benchmark really was, is it going to be paid out upon termination, as opposed to now it's more so the substance of the benefit earned and that being taken in future years, not so much whether or not it's paid out at the point of termination. So again, something to look forward to. Thanks to the GASB, always keeping us on our toes with new accounting standards. And so with that, I just want to say a big thank you to everyone on the team. We actually were at a place where we were actually ready to issue the audit right at the end of January. Things we had made some significant plans, both with management and also on our side, to make sure that the audit was going to go out on time. Ended up not issuing until middle of March, as we were waiting on some of the charter school audits to come back. And so some of those did not come back until I think March 1st was when we got the last of those. So I think we were able to issue within a week or 10 days of getting those reports. But again, glad that we were able to present at this April board meeting. And if there's any questions at this point in time, I'd be glad to take this.
Thank you so much, Lance and Julie, for presenting that. Again, if there's any questions, now's the time. We want to respect everybody's time. We have a full agenda today. All right, hearing none, we'll move on. Again, thanks, Lance. Thanks, Julie, for presenting. That's an awesome job, guys.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right, moving right along, we have the presentation of the internal funds audit from our partners at Carr, Riggs, and Ingram, and I believe we have Jennifer on.
Yes, thank you. Good morning, everyone.
Right. Good morning.
I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and get started. Travis made it clear that there's a full agenda. So I'm going to go through these slides. If there's any questions, please feel free to reach out and ask. But I'm going to go ahead and go through, touch some highlights on the financial statements, the audit process, some of the findings that we had for the schools, and then some of the recommendations we had for the district. So if we look at the financials, we could see here, this is the audit of the internal accounts. And so those are the funds, I always like to remind everyone, these are the funds, the fundraisers, the field trips, the prom ticket sales. So this is money raised by the students to be spent on the students. And so if we look here, we'll see the difference from year to year. And if we go back to pre-COVID, in 2020, we had additions of about $10.5 million. Then it dipped down to about $6 million, because as you can imagine, the activity at the schools went down quite a bit. Now we're kind of creeping back up, and in 2023, you could see our additions are at $13 million. So that would be like revenue for the fund was at $13 million. So we're now past where we were pre-COVID days, and so the activity has definitely gotten back to the activity we had before 2020, and I'm sure we'll continue to grow. As far as our report, we also had an unmodified report on the internal funds. So everything was materially stated in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. The only audit adjustment we had was provided by the client to record an allowance for doubtful accounts. And so there was nothing that we came across during the audit that we needed to adjust the numbers for. And then as far as sensitive footnotes, honestly, there's not really a lot of sensitive footnotes for internal funds. It's a pretty straightforward fund, but we do have to disclose investments if there's any concentrations of credit risk, which we did not have this year. So that's something that is in the footnotes. There's a few things we're required to communicate with those charged with governance, and I did present to the school board a very similar presentation a few months ago, but I also wanted to just touch on a few of these items with you. As far as disagreements with management on accounting principles, how to apply them, we didn't have any such disagreements. We didn't have any difficulties during the audit. Everything went very smooth. We did not come across any fraud or illegal acts during our audit procedures. And this is a big undertaking, because with internal funds, we do a lot of compliance testing with various rules, with the school board rules and with the state of Florida Red Book rules for internal funds. So we do ask for a lot of information during the audit, and so we do have to work very closely with the finance and accounting department, with Align and his team, and also internal audit. And then we reach out to every school, and they each provide us with certain information. So I always like to kind of give a little bit of credit to all of these different departments, because without them, it would make it very hard for us to audit. So we kind of have a system going, and it works very well to get the audits done. As I mentioned before, we're doing a lot of compliance testing. These are some of the different areas that we're performing the compliance testing in, that you can look over. And we do perform compliance testing at 100% of the schools. So we do pick samples at every school so that we can test everything. Every year we can test a few items from every school. This is a slide that shows our average findings per school or department that has an internal fund. And you can see that it's been relatively consistent over the years. In 2021, it decreased, and that aligns with the amount of activity that decreased during that COVID year. And then you could see it climbed a little more. 2023, we did have a little higher, 1.15 findings per school was the average. So it was a little higher than the other years. And I'm going to talk about that in a minute and go through some of the common findings that we had at the schools. Here's a breakdown of findings by school, and I do want to clarify that when I use the word findings for these schools, it's a little different than like if CLA had a finding when they were doing the single audit, where it's reported, you know, on the in the report. These are a little different. They're more like recommendations, improvement points that we came across where a school maybe didn't, you know, there's a form that they were supposed to get signed, a fundraiser form before they have a fundraiser. And we had, if we looked at 5 fundraisers and we found one where they didn't get the form approved ahead of time, well, then they get a finding for that. So every instance we come across, we give them the school a finding. So a school can have, you know, as you can see on here, they can have 5 or more findings per school. So a little different, not quite at the elevated at that level where the findings that, you know, that CLA would talk about. But we did come across these instances. And as far as 5 or more findings, we had 12 schools this year that had 5 or more findings. And that's compared to 4 schools last year that had that many findings. And so that is something we dug in a little deeper. And I'm going to move on. As far as the having no findings, we did have over 50% of the schools that had 0 findings. So that is definitely, and even with 1 finding, there's another 22%. So a large majority of schools that have 0 or 1 findings, which again, every instance we come across, we're counting that as a finding. So, pretty good statistics there. As far as some of our common findings, this year we had a lot of schools that had deficit account balances at the end of the year. And what that means is they're not deficit in total. It's not like they've overspent. Their cash account is a negative number. But what it is within their internal funds, they have individual funds. They may have one for 5th grade. They may have one for the football team. And those little, those sub-accounts are ones where they did have deficit balances at the end of the year. There were 28 accounts for all over the entire school district that had a negative balance at the end of the year. And a lot of these, when we reach out to the schools and we get responses from them for any finding that they have, and a lot of them, it was either they were accounts where they were expecting some type of reimbursement, but the reimbursement didn't happen until after June 30th. Or in some cases, it was just overspending the account and not realizing, you know, where their balance was. But again, in a handful of them, it was a special instance, something that happened that caused the account to go negative. A lot of times we'll have yearbook accounts that might go negative because, as you can imagine, they estimate how many yearbooks they're going to sell. So they purchase a certain number. And if they don't sell all of them, then, you know, they still have that cost and they may not have the revenue coming in. So that is something that we may see too. Official receipts not properly accounted for. I wanted to explain that if a receipt is voided, the school's required to keep all the copies of it. So these are cases where, and the next one too, the report of monies collected form, that's another type of receipt not being accounted for. That's when a lot of times they void them. And, you know, a teacher may have one and a report of monies collected form, they void it, they throw it away because they don't realize that, you know, it's important to be able to account for all of them. And so a lot of those relate to those receipts that were voided by someone and just thrown or lost or thrown away by accident. And then we have one here for fundraising activities, the forum not being approved or not being approved ahead of time. And again, with activity increasing, that is one of those findings that we're going to see more of as schools go back to having more and more fundraisers. And then the last two, the deposits not made timely to the bank, just holding on to the deposit. A lot of times it is secure at the school, but it's just not at the bank like it should be. And then the last one is the fundraising financial form, which is like a sales report not being submitted after the fundraiser. Sometimes the school year's over and the teachers are gone, and if they didn't submit their sales report, the financial secretary may have a hard time trying to get it from them. The key is just trying to track all the fundraisers and making sure that those sales reports are done right after the fundraiser is done. Before I get into this, I also wanted to mention that we did have a handful of findings that decreased significantly over from the prior year. And that was, some of those were filling out the fundraiser form correctly and properly and completely. That number went down quite a bit. We had donations over $500 need to be approved by the school board. That went down to 0. We had 0 of those findings this year. So I did want to kind of give the flip side that there are findings that decrease year after year, which should be acknowledged. As far as our internal control matters, we had one significant deficiency, and that relates to when I went back and said that we had a larger number of schools that had more than 5 findings. This is kind of an overall finding or overall comment that when we have that many schools that have multiple findings like that, we just recommend that the district look at their training that they're doing. At every school district that I work with, and I work with quite a few of them, the financial secretaries or the school bookkeepers are turning over at such a high rate, and that's been happening the last couple of years. And so it's definitely a challenge to try to train and be able to train each financial secretary that comes in. But we just recommend that, reviewing the process, looking to see how often you're training, the types of training you're doing. There could be maybe different formats. In the past, there was some on-demand training that the district had, maybe some in-person. There are some challenges with your district being so big geographically, doing trainings in person, but there are some different ideas and that we can definitely share that we've seen at other districts. And along with the training, we recommend that the manual for the internal accounts be updated. It's been several years since it's been updated, and with some changes and changes with the way processes work, we think that it would be helpful if there was an update to the manual. It would help the financial secretaries maybe be able to look up different rules, different procedures a little easier. So management responded, and I know this is a lot of words, so I'm just going to basically say they responded to that comment by letting us know what trainings they did over the summer. So this would have been last summer, and some of the follow-up training sessions that they did, some of the trainings that they're offering up to the different school financial secretaries. And so this is a plan, something that they're looking at, and they plan to expand on the number of trainings. So I think they're doing exactly what we talked about during the audit, and again, understanding the challenge of the high turnover in that position, and just the need for continually training the new ones and even financial secretaries that have been there for a while. And then also, as far as the internal accounts manual, there have been plans to update it the past year or so, but there was just some turnover in the positions that were assigned to update that manual. So that is another project that they are working on and then looking at updating. So I expect next year when we come out for the audit, well, I say next year, but in 2024, that this will be updated. And then we just had some improvement points. The IT general controls is something that we have to look at. with every audit. And so I have talked with the IT department about these. I've gone over these, and they're just some recommendations. We mentioned annual security training for all employees. Right now, there is some training. It's just not required. But with the high level of cyber attacks that are going on, we just recommend that be required, so all employees kind of have that knowledge of what to look for, when it comes to emails or any other malicious attempts that could be made against the school district as far as getting information that they shouldn't have their hands on. And also we have on here the disaster recovery failover test, just to make sure that that's being done annually. And then some of their change management policies, just kind of clarifying a few things in those policies. But we did not come across any material weaknesses that we would need to report to the school board. And that is my presentation. And I will ask if there's any questions or comments.
Hi, Jennifer. This is Travis. Real quick and, pretty sure easy to answer. You mentioned on some of those on a senior report, and because I'm in banking, I kind of get curious. What are you guys considering on an audit basis a timely deposit? You mentioned there's a deficiency in timely deposits.
Well, and that follows the school district rules that if it's under a certain dollar, like at the most, it's a week from when it's received. So we're just testing in compliance with the rules. Every district has different rules, but it's pretty much, most of them are looking for it to be deposited in a few days within when it's collected. But Polk gives an exception, like if it's a very small amount, then they give them a few more days to.
Yeah, and I guess I was just seeing if we were testing it on an industry standard or what the board specifies as timely deposit. That's all.
It's what the board specifies.
Excellent, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, any other questions for Jennifer? Hearing none, we'll move along. Thank you again, Jennifer, for that.
All right,
that was excellent.
Thank you.
All right, next we have the finance update. I saw Heather was on and Alana as well, so you guys go ahead and take it away. Appreciate it.
Good morning, everyone. If I can, really quickly before starting, mention what the question you just asked about the timely deposits. The district, we're currently vetting some vendors to look at being able to accept electronic payments. We know that's been a priority. The board has made it a priority. We've made it a priority. It's just going to take some time because obviously a lot of that support has to come from our IT department and their ability to take on working with a vendor where it can incorporate and where it works with our current ERP system. But that is something that we're currently working on too, and hopefully soon can roll out, because that would also help a lot with that timeliness of deposit if we're not dealing with cash or checks and having to, have to transport that money back and forth. Currently, we have a armored car service that picks up at all our schools and our district locations that accept payments. So that'll help if it's just electronically going through. So if I can share my screen.
And thank you for that, Alana. I appreciate that.
So I wanted to start with the most recent financial statements that we have ready, which is January. We just closed February, obviously, but because of spring break there in between March, February is always a little bit behind in closing, but we should have those submitted here for the next district board meeting that's coming up now in April. So I'll run you through January quickly. I wanted to point out, I was looking at the last time we presented financials, and I want to say that was, I think it was the November financials. If you'll notice, on our investments have increased significantly through the month end of January. I want to say And you can see our taxes, the taxes receivable in the general fund has gone down to 31 million. Where back in November, those taxes receivable, which is the local taxes, ad valorem taxes that we receive from the county, was up at 238 million. So typically, our tax revenue starts to come in during the months of November, the bulk of it in December, and then we still have some residual amounts that come in January and February, and late tax payments that come in later on. But you'll see the investments increased significantly. That's because once we start to collect those taxes from the tax collector, we put those in to our investments in order for safekeeping, and so they can earn some interest. But now, as the school year progresses from now through the end of June, we'll start to draw down as needed in order to meet our cash flow. We still have, obviously, state revenues that we collect from FEFP throughout the rest of the year, but that just want to address that that's the usual cyclical nature of the revenues that come in, especially when you're looking at what's going to be listed as the current ending fund balance for the month of January. You see it's a very high amount currently for the end of January, but we'll start to work down on that as the year progresses, the rest of the year. So looking at this summary sheet for all of the funds, again, you'll notice the ending fund balance there at $211 million for the month of January. But again, we'll start to use some of that fund balance as the year progresses. In our special revenue funds, you can see the majority of it is with our food service funds. On our grants, I like to point out revenues and expenditures, you see a very minimal difference. Obviously, we expend those funds up front, and then we immediately turn around and seek reimbursement for the expenses that we have on a monthly basis. So normally, we don't see a very high fund balance remaining on our special revenue on the grant side. Our debt service funds, we're at $30.6 million. Again, that's for the various bonds and certificates of participations that the district has that will continue ongoing through 2030 to make those payments. Our capital projects, again, a very high fund balance currently for the end of January. Again, we receive our local capital improvements millage as well from our ad valorem taxes. Our ad valorem taxes continue to increase year over year, partly because of an increase in property tax values, as well as new property taxable values that are coming online, all the new homes that are being built, new businesses that are coming in. I'm sure you all saw the article that said Polk County was the #1 county for growth, people moving in the state and across the country. So for now, I'll say obviously that brings all that extra revenue coming in, but together with that increase in revenue, we're going to see an increase in expenditures going out with new schools that have to be built, expansions at schools that are going to be necessary, and an increase in staff, obviously, to support all the new students and families moving in. Our internal service funds, which is our health plan, the fund balance was ending at $22.6 million. We did have the board increase its contribution this year, again, to help keep that fund functioning. If Heather wants to discuss any of that later or at a future date, I know the health insurance fund is always an important topic. And our internal funds ended at $13 million. Again, we'll see an increase of revenues around this time as certain activities ramp up and they start to make purchases and fundraising, selling of tickets for events, proms and whatnot. But then as the school year ends, we'll see our expenses go up on that side as those events come to fruition. This is a graph just showing our revenues and expenses and fund balance across all the funds. Just a summary slide of the previous chart. Again, on the general fund, you can see we still have, based on our current budget, about 40% of our revenue still to come in. The bulk of that is the state sources, which is our FEFP money, which they send down every 2 weeks. We get a disbursement, and that'll continue through the month of June. But you can see on our local sources, our current budget of $275.8 million, that's the ad valorem taxes. And you can see we're just around 10% remaining to still be collected on that amount. And it may exceed that amount. I mean, we really won't know till we get closer to the end of the year. We often see past due tax revenue coming in from prior years that wasn't collected by the tax collector. And if they collect it during the current year, we obviously receive those and record those as well. And our transfers, which occur when we do our debt service payments, we transfer from our capital funds, and capital revenue that we receive from our local capital improvement millage gets transferred into the general fund to help cover those debt service payments as they come due. On our expense side, we're just at around 50% of the budgeted amount. On the general fund, you can see, and on the instruction side, which is the bulk of our budget, our teacher salaries, you can see we're at 50%, and in line with what was budgeted for the year. Here's our general fund revenues, budget to actuals, just summarized on a chart. You can see again our local sources almost fully received. Like I said, we do get residuals in February through the end of the year, but the bulk of it has already been collected. You think most people pay their property taxes escrowed through their mortgage, so right around November, that gets collected and gets dispersed out to us in December. Here's a pie chart showing where our the majority of the expenses are. You can see obviously the majority of our expenses in the general fund, always for instruction. That's the product the school board sells, is instruction teachers, so that's where the majority of the expenses always are. This chart here is comparing current year for the same period versus prior year for the same period. You can see our revenues are up 24.5%. Again, timing of when some of these revenues are collected, but you can also see in our local sources especially just that increase in the ad valorem of the property values that has gone up, and the new properties that go online that are now paying taxes for the first year. So it's a trend we've seen over the last few years. How long it holds up is yet to be seen. If there's going to be a slowing down of the growth, that I'm not an economic or real estate expert on that side to speak to it, but that's just where we're at the moment. And again, showing our ending fund balance for January at that 211, again, because of that influx of the local revenues. This again shows our expenses, but this time by classification. So it's showing it, you can see by the different categories, from instruction, pupil personnel services, our food services, just broken out. The same information, just showing it differently. And again, you can see the majority of the expenses, salaries and benefits combined, year to date is $409 million so far. And here's that chart again. This is just showing the salaries to show, but not including the benefits. And here again, you can see now by category our salaries and our benefits. As I always state, the overwhelming majority is our instructional services. This is the chart that was asked for before, where we show again those classifications instead of just by function, but actually showing by which area, and to compare to prior year. And you can see there's a slight increase. We did, the board did approve raises for the PEA employees in December that was retroactive to July. And I believe the Ask Me Union raises were approved in January or February, also retroactive to July. And for the general fund here, this is a summary of what our projection for the ending fund balance is. My screen share is not on.
Alan,
Thanks.
yeah, Alan, I was just.
Sorry, thank you for that, Earl, who came in.
Yeah,
Is it on now? You can see the general fund balance comparison.
I can see it now. I was trying to follow along.
I
with the
apologize.
statements, but
So our general fund balance comparison, this is where we project what the ending fund balance is going to be. And again, that's why I say that what you see for the end of January will start to use up that fund balance from now through the end of the year. And in keeping with the projection with the budget office, you can see we're projecting to add in a 5.2% fund balance for the year. When CLA was presenting earlier, the fund balance for the district last year ended at a little over 8%. Partly the last few years that's occurred because of those ESSER and those COVID funds that had come in and the ability to reclassify some expenses over to that. But those funds will be ending soon, so we'll probably see the ending fund balance closer to the projections that we currently have now versus what we've seen in the last 2 years because of those COVID funds being available. And then I wanted to jump over really quickly. For next meeting, we hope to have the gentleman present. He was not available to present this time. Mr. Cristofaro with Deep Blue, who's the district's contracted investment advisor firm. But I did share this with the committee, and I wanted to just briefly touch on it. These are the district's investment balances at the end of February, not January, which was the financial statements you just saw. But again, a slight increase there. I wanted to point out here where it says cash on hand, the 82 million. Heather had asked me about this recently when we were meeting to go over the investments and the financials. When you see the next set of statements come out for March, you'll see that balance significantly decrease where we've taken that excess cash and reinvested it as well. With the raises going on, we decided to keep a little cash on hand just because there was going to be retroactive raises. Going back to July, we wanted to make sure we had enough on hand to cover. We also saw an increase in revenues again in the internal funds and some residual tax collector money coming in. So this is as of February 29th, but that following week in March, we went ahead and reinvested a significant amount of that just so that it's, again, for safekeeping and earning as much interest as we can for the district. And if there's any questions on any of the other funds for the January financials or anything, I'm happy to answer.
All right, I don't think anybody's anxious to jump in there, Eileen.
I need to be able to stop sharing my screen. Where do I lost the other screen. Oh, there it is. Okay. Nope. Okay. Am I still sharing the screen or is it gone now?
It's still up.
Oh. There we go.
All right. So, Eileen, is that all that you had for us on that today?
Yes, unless there was any questions related to anything that CLA presented or that Jennifer presented with the internal funds audit that we can address too. I have Earl is here with us too over the internal funds in case there's any questions about any of those. We're here.
All right. Hold up at first.
Hi, I have one question, sorry. Only because we've heard the issues with payroll approvals. And then brought that up with the audit, and when we've asked about it previously, it's a solution is y'all are working on it. I know you're trying really hard. It's at least a year or two out. Does this change anything with the auditors now bringing it to the front? Does that change the timeline at all?
No, ma'am. I'd like to address it. Several years ago, the district tried to implement a timekeeping software called Kronos. And we've actually piloted it with some of the food service and custodial shops and have been using it, but we could never get it to fully integrate. So even though the custodians are entering, custodians and food service employees, or some, are entering their time, they still have to print those timesheets out, and it's manually entered into SAP, which causes an issue. We have talked about our upgrade that we're moving forward with to SAP HANA, and that will be within the next couple of years. But one step that we have taken, things that we've done training, but we've also changed what we've done. So we had a process that we would send out a report called a gross to net report, and it would basically list your employees, and then it would have your gross amount, your net amount, and your gross amount, and the school secretaries would review that. But we felt that wasn't really helpful to anybody and or descriptive. So what we're providing now is we have an employee roster that says Jane, John, Jim are all at your school. Jane is active, John is inactive, and Jim is active. And this is their status. So first the secretaries will look, and that's going to help with overpayments. Because if I'm inactive and I'm not marked that way on the sheet, then they can identify and contact HR and payroll, and we can find out what's going on with that piece. There's also a leave report, and that report will say, Heather took 2 sick days this week. Well, actually, I took 2 vacation days. So that's something we need to look at. Or I've been marked inactive and I haven't taken any time. So that's step 2, reviewing the leave. And then step 3 will be a modified version of the gross to net report, which is going to show what you were paid. But we've taken some things off of it to simplify it and make it more specific. We did a secretary training academy, and our IT department has also helped us create an online module. So we're going to have that as a Schoology module. So how it plays in with the secretaries is the secretaries are going to review this information weekly, and they're also going to review the portion right before the payroll comes out. Then they're going to sit with their principals and say, okay, here's the information we've received. This is what I found out. This is the research I've done. The principals are going to go through and they're going to check off and sign off on that before payroll is entered. We've also met with our regional superintendents who have met with the principals and discussed this process, and also the process that it's very necessary that they review and sign off on all time. So that's our immediate, what are we going to do right now until we can fix our system and until we can fix the online piece. And then our new assistant sup of IT has been working with our consultants to find out, can we make Kronos work when we move to HANA? Is there another solution? You can also build like a front-facing portal that we might be able to create our own entry. And then that would help us automate our leave requests too. So we are taking this very seriously. As far as the software, I can't speed up the timeline in it, but we're continuing to come up with stopgap measures to fix the problem without software the best we can. Does that help?
Hey, Terry, thank you for the question. Heather, thank you for the response. Excellent. Any more questions regarding the finance update? Hearing none, we're going to move on to Luke and the internal audit update.
All right, thank you, Travis. We feel like we've been doing a good job of really cruising through all of our material here, so I'm going to try to continue that trend. And I'm going to share my screen, just have a little PowerPoint presentation for you all. All right, you guys see that? Is it working? All right, good. So you all, obviously, Jennifer presented to us the results of the internal funds audit. They did also present that to the school board during the January work session. So this is actually Carr, Riggs, and Ingram's 10th year performing our internal funds audit. And as Jennifer mentioned, they audit 100% of our schools and departments that have internal accounts. So the internal audit department worked with Carr, Riggs, and Ingram. Jennifer mentioned that, as well as the accounting department, and there was lots of staff involved in that. And having previously worked in internal accounts, I'm very familiar with what a process that is. So I'd like to echo her comments, is that it really is a group effort, and it's a very lengthy and data-driven audit process. So, and then the internal auditing department, we prepared a summary of the most common audit findings from the audit, as well as a graph of the findings from the last 3 years, and we distributed that to the schools. That way they can just see, what are those common things that Carr, Riggs are finding when they do these internal funds audits, just kind of used, as something for reference they can look at moving forward, keep in the back of their mind when they're going about their day, as far as what are the most common things that typically happen and show up in audits. So, moving on to some school audits and investigations that we completed during the last quarter. So we had the regional assistant superintendent contact us about McLaughlin Academy of Excellence, but they requested that we review really a broad range of things, but it was related to just kind of their financial position as a school. The previous principal had just resigned from the district, and there was an acting principal that was currently in the role, and the financial secretary was also fairly new. She had been there for less than a year. So what we did was we basically made a graph of all the funds that the school had available to them. They had operating funds, turnaround supplement funds, and Title I funds, and they also had internal funds. But a good chunk of those internal funds was from a donation from Duke Energy, which could only be used for students. So they were a little limited in that regard. And then we did our sample of everything that we were looking at. We sampled deposits, ticket reports, purchasing card purchases, and then what we found was more than the typical number of errors in documenting cash collections and preparing deposits. And we also found unallowed purchases that came from that Duke Energy internal account, because that account, as specified by Duke Energy, the company, they said that the funds could only be used for students, but they were being used for staff in some cases. There was also quite a few errors and discrepancies in ticket sales and completing ticket reports. But the good thing is that the school did begin using the school district's online ticketing platform, which is Hometown Ticketing. And that was at the beginning of this current school year, 23-24. So that obviously takes a lot of the manual preparation of selling tickets and preparing reports out of the equation. So we're hoping that will definitely minimize these ticket errors moving forward. Continuing on with the audits and investigations, this is still at McLaughlin. Deposit paperwork was submitted late to the district office, and there was actually 6 deposits from several months prior that had never been deposited or sent to the district office yet. There was deposits that contained inaccurate or missing information. There was direct collections in the office that were not receipted by someone other than the financial secretary. That's just an internal control measure. You don't want the same person taking the money and also depositing the money. It's just an internal control deficiency there. You need to have a check and balance, so to speak, in that regard. Funds were not properly documented on receipts. A duplicate deposit was made, and then there was deficiencies found in admission tickets. And going back to the purchasing card transactions, there was a couple purchases that were purchased from outside vendors instead of from the county warehouse. We always, advise to purchase from the county warehouse if you can. It's a significant cost savings as compared to purchasing from Amazon or Staples or something like that. There was a required approval form that was not uploaded for one purchase, and then purchases totaling $3,671 were made from the Duke Energy internal account as designated for students, but those purchases were made for staff. So our recommendations, we recommended that the financial secretary and the principal, the current acting principal, that they attend live financial trainings when they're offered, and that they also review and use the documentation on the website, because there's lots of manuals, forms, job aids that they could be using that would kind of help alleviate a lot of these findings that we found. And then we also suggested that the financial secretary shadow a more experienced financial secretary at another close by school. And then lastly, we just recommended that the principal provide increased oversight of the financial secretary until there's a improved accuracy in record keeping. And the other thing under audits and investigations, we had an investigation that we turned over to the Polk County Sheriff's Office just for further review, and then that was just recently in the last month or so, but then we had another one that we had given them back in October. That's still confidential because those investigations are still ongoing, but we will definitely bring those to the committee and report on them once they're finalized, once we get a report from the sheriff's office or whatever they looked into regarding those. Is there any questions about school audits and investigations before I move on? We will go on to payroll audits. This past quarter, we completed the following payroll audits: Spencer Holland Elementary, Sleepy Hill Middle, Chain of Lakes Elementary, George Jenkins High School, Polk City Elementary, East Side Elementary, Lake Gibson Middle, Palmetto Elementary, and Lake Alfred Polytech Academy. We only listed the schools that had atypical findings, so that would be more than the average or common number of findings. And those are the only ones that I'm going to talk about today, just because those are the ones that were atypical. So Spencer Holland Elementary, a custodian was granted approval and worked an additional 4 hours. The time was not posted, therefore the employee did not get paid for those hours. In addition, the amount of additional time worked was posted incorrectly for 5 employees, resulting in some being overpaid up to 8 hours and some underpaid. And also 2 non-exempt employees were allowed to use compensatory time, otherwise known as comp time, to cover absences totaling 3.5 hours. Comp time was disallowed by the school district back in 2015, so we just had to update the school on what the current policy is regarding comp time for that. Sleepy Hill Middle, a custodian was granted approval and worked an additional 4.5 hours in our sampled week. The time was not posted to SAP and therefore was not paid to the employee. George Jenkins High School. So overall they had more than the typical number and severity of findings, including 6.5 hours of unrecorded absences for 1 employee, and also a custodian underpaid 29.75 hours due to the payroll secretary failing to post additional hours worked and posting the incorrect number of hours on 5 separate days. East Side Elementary, the principal did not approve any payroll entries in SAP, and that is an internal control deficiency because obviously we want the principal to be approving all the time that is worked by the people that are working at his or her school. Lake Gibson Middle School. This school also had more than a typical number and severity of findings, including unrecorded absences for 2 employees, multiple posting errors to SAP for the type of leave for 5 employees, the amount of leave for 2 employees, and additional time worked was posted incorrectly, resulting in overpayments to 3 employees. And there was also multiple deficiencies found with time records and also leave forms. Just kind of wrap up the payroll section. We did work with School Technology Services to move the online payroll course to the current platform in Schoology. We've kind of been, as a district, we have a lot of new portals and websites that we a lot of intranet sites that are changing. So we moved our online payroll course over to that new intranet site. And then all principals, department heads, and secretaries, anybody involved in payroll accounting, they were notified of the annual requirement to take the new payroll course and pass. Of course, they have to get at least an 80% grade to consider having passed the course. All right, any question about the payroll audits or the payroll training?
Yeah, Luke, I have one. On the deficiency with the east side, I read the principal did not approve any payroll entries. So my question then moving forward is, how did anything happen? If the principal didn't approve them, how were they then processed?
Yeah, so the payroll department, short answer is the payroll department approved them. Because when they run payroll, they'll basically they basically sweep all the entries that are out there that haven't been approved yet by the department head or principal, whoever it is that was responsible and was in that workflow to approve those entries. When they're running payroll and they have a deadline to meet that hasn't been approved, then they go in there and do an approval of all the outstanding entries because they have to meet the payroll deadline.
Right. And then as that relates to the training mentioned in the last bullet point, that the secretaries and department heads are required to do that. What is the status of the training on that particular situation? If they're required to pass training and enroll in that training, I guess if none of it was done at all, I'm concerned. Finding deficiencies is normal, but when it says none were done, that kind of raises a red flag to me.
Yeah, we don't have, not to make it sound better than it is, but we don't have too many schools like that where we find none of them were done. Typically, that's like the principal, and this principal was a little newer too, so it's like they weren't maybe informed of the requirement that they have to go in there and approve the payroll entries, which that's why. To your other side of that, that's why we have them take this course, because, it clearly spells out in there, when exceptions are entered in SAP for time, leave, whatever it is, you have to go in there and approve the entries that are outstanding, and it has to be done in a timely manner too, and that's what we tell the schools when we have our audit follow-up conferences with them. It's like, you can't go in and approve payroll once a month, because payroll has multiple deadlines throughout the month where they're running payroll because, they're about to send out the direct deposit. So you have to go in there at a minimum weekly, because otherwise, if you go in there and they're not there, it's because payroll has already cleared out all those entries and mass approved them. So that's what we stress to, everybody, the secretaries and the principals, and it's included in the course as well, is that you have to have a plan of when you're going to go in and approve payroll, and it needs to be at least once a week at a minimum. So
excellent. Thank you for that answer. Any other questions for Luke?
Yeah, I've got one, Luke. When you find deficiencies that are atypical in a school, is there any retraining that is then put back onto those principals or department heads or secretaries as a way to refresh the processes that they haven't complied with.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it would obviously come from our audit report, because after just kind of go through the process, we do the audit, we issue the report, we give the principal and secretary a chance to respond to our findings in the report, and then after we get their responses back, we have a conference with whoever the principal wants to have in there. Normally it's the principal, secretary, sometimes the assistant principal, and we go over in detail the entire report, every finding that was in the report, our recommendations for each finding, and then we also go over just talking points, things that didn't rise to the level of findings, but things that we identified that like were not best business practices as it relates to payroll. So, and then that's basically our involvement, and I guess you could say our training for them is when we go through things that they're doing wrong, current processes that they're doing wrong, we tell them how to address it, and then moving forward we tell them what they should be doing to fix it. Other training would have to obviously come from different departments, but we consider the audit to be a training opportunity for the principal and the secretary, because what it does is it shows them that they've been doing something wrong in the process that they didn't know they were doing wrong before. Like this principal, not approving any payroll entries. She actually didn't know that was her job, to go in there and regularly approve payroll for all of her employees. So now that she knows, obviously, she's going to take different steps moving forward. But as far as the training piece goes, after a payroll audit, we consider, our report and our conference, it's our lengthy conference with everybody involved with payroll at the school, to be a sort of training for the school. So.
Do you find that there are more significant deficiencies as it relates to payroll audits when you have new secretaries and new principals in schools, or that are not within the school district itself from other positions? Like in this case, you said it was a new principal and she didn't know. So I find that from my past audit experience myself, not educating the staff on their requirements and their processes is more of a deficiency in the process itself, not necessarily a deficiency in the staff.
Right.
Because we haven't notified them of the responsibilities they have. So I go back to more of an onboarding question within human resources. Is that a training that is provided at the time that she's become a principal, so she knows on the front end that that's something that she needs to take care of?
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. There obviously, and I believe there is, I don't know exactly what the details of that might look like, but we can follow up, and kind of see what that onboarding training is for new principals, and definitely get back with you. And just to answer your other question, like, do we find that it's more prevalent in like new employees or employees that weren't already part of the district? It's a funny question, because really it's like we have new people that come into the district, and a lot of them are really good at following the instructions that they've received in training, but then sometimes some fall through the cracks. But then on the other hand, it's like people that have been in the district for a long time, they get kind of in a rut, so to speak, and they're stuck in their ways of doing things how they've always done them. And so that's because I feel like it's the same, whether they've been here for 15 years or whether they're new. It's like they're going to kind of have the same amount of errors, because either they've been doing it for a long time and nobody's ever told them they're doing it wrong, and they then pass that knowledge on to a new payroll secretary who starts doing it wrong from the beginning, or they come in and they don't know. So I feel like it's basically the same, whether you're already in the district or whether you're new to the district. And obviously it goes back to training in the end, ultimately. But I can follow up on that onboarding question and get back with you, for sure.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thanks, Luke.
Yeah.
Thank you for the question, Chris, and thank you for the response, Luke. Anything else? Davina's been really quiet. Nothing? All right. With that being said, we're coming close to the end of the meeting there, so now we'll take a few moments for public comment. I don't see anybody on from public, but we'll still give that its due diligence and credence. Hearing none, we're going to go ahead and set the next meeting date for Tuesday, July 2nd at 9 a.m. Please let Carol's office or Luke know if there's any discrepancies with that time, but we look forward to everybody being there. And with that, I want to say to all you guys that are still on, I appreciate your time today. I know it's one of those longer agendas we had, but I appreciate the questions and I appreciate your attention. And with that, we'll have our meeting adjourned. Appreciate everyone. Have a good day.